Welcome back to another episode of the Boss Juice podcast. Today we have Jordan Nelson for this special series that we like to call Lunch Break. This is our second installment of this. Also, we got our man, Jaden Johnson here. He's filling in for Sean today. Jaden's usually behind the scenes, but he's going to be filling in today on the mic here. Jordan, thanks for coming on, man. If you don't mind, before we get started, tell us a little bit about InStudio and your story and how you kind of got started into entrepreneurship.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So InStudio is a company I started 4 years ago. And what we do is we provide artists with accessible studios to book and record in, as well as studios use tools to help them manage and grow their business. So I was still a recording engineer. But during my time in studios, you see these holes in the processes as opposed when it comes to acquiring clients, when it comes to studios, managing all that with all their engineers and things of that nature. So I decided why not try to fill that gap there. So it's basically, I guess, the quick summary of how InStudio got started. But yeah.
Do you have a niche market that you're trying to serve with these artists?
What do you mean by that?
So are you targeting larger artists or more of like the independent individual artists?
Sure, yeah. So it's definitely more the independent individual artist. Larger artists, they have no struggle finding studios, obviously. So the smaller artists, it comes to prices of studios. Can they afford it? How do they access them? How do they communicate with the studios to book a session? That's a lot of the troubles they run into with that stuff.
And just thinking about it from the perspective of if you're going about it and not having a marketplace, does your app function kind of like different studios can market their prices, the actual artist can come on and maybe look up the budget that they're looking for? So it's like kind of a marketplace for studios in that area, so they can see them all instead of having to find them on Instagram or
Absolutely.
Google.
Yeah. So the marketplace is a big part of it. Obviously a studio in Pittsburgh, they make the listing, and then an artist comes to Pittsburgh or they live here, we'll be able to show them studios in their area. So Pittsburgh artists will be able to see that Pittsburgh studio. If it's an LA artist, they'll be able to see the LA studios there, and then they'll be able to go through the pricing and see what best fits their needs and their budget.
Love that. So going off kind of the Pittsburgh market, how has the Pittsburgh entrepreneurial culture helped or hurt InStudio getting off the ground?
That's an interesting question. It more helped, that's for sure. People like minds, great to bounce ideas off of. I think one thing where it struggles is the music side of things. Is like Pittsburgh, in terms of business, is not big into the music scene. You look about all the Pittsburgh artists, the big Pittsburgh artists, they blow up and they leave. The labels that were in Pittsburgh at one point are no longer in Pittsburgh. So in terms of Pittsburgh supporting the business side of the music industry, that's been a struggle, but that's hopefully something I look to change down the road, or be involved in changing down the road.
Yes.
Because in this special episode here, this lunch break series, one of the topics we want to highlight, and one of the reasons why we kind of brought you on here, is that you're an entrepreneur and you've been involved in the entrepreneurial culture and market, whatever you want to call it, in Pittsburgh. And we personally know your story about how it's been a hard journey getting started. And entrepreneurs in general, it's hard to get your idea off the ground. But it's interesting that you say Pittsburgh helped you. I know that when we were engaged, you had talked a bit about looking for funding and stuff outside of Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Did you find that outside of Pittsburgh was more helpful than inside Pittsburgh? So
in terms of funding, we never actually ended up getting funded, which I think was a blessing in disguise. But people were far more receptive outside of Pittsburgh. When you reach out to them for funding, send the pitch deck, all that stuff, they were more interested. But I don't, want to give Pittsburgh a bad rep on that aspect. There were people who listened, but again, with business and music being so foreign to, I think, a lot of Pittsburgh investments, it didn't it just didn't click, at the time.
If you could change one thing about Pittsburgh that would make it more helpful for entrepreneurs, what would that be?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's got a lot of great programs and people in business that help entrepreneurs like myself and others in other industries move forward. But, I don't think I could give one solid answer to that. I think there's a lot of little things that, could go a long way. Obviously, my business being in music, it would be creating different networks with people in the music industry, helping growing these businesses and moving the industry forward, specifically using technology and things of that nature.
Yes. I just want to make a side comment, just when really reflecting on Pittsburgh and its impact on both kind of the world of innovation and also of music. Mm-hmm. There's been substantial individuals or very successful individuals, groundbreaking people and companies that have come from Pittsburgh. But it is so strange to think that at this point in 2024, because we were just at a music event for independent artists, mutual friend, a couple weeks ago, and like just trying to initiate maybe building like a culture for artists to come together and just from a creative perspective, be able to, have something that they can, meet and, possibly grow together and work together. But it's just so interesting to think that after all the history in both tech, innovation, and also in music, that there's not infrastructure. But like you said before, it's such an awesome opportunity to take that risk and start something. We're a major city and we don't have infrastructure with those two things that have been established. I don't know. It's exciting, but it's also kind of crazy to think about that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that event we were at was very impressive. I was glad that it happened because Pittsburgh, I've never seen an event like that to bring artists together and people in the music world together to discuss and network and find opportunities together. But one thing that is an issue kind of outside of the business world, but within the artists in Pittsburgh is, and I think it's getting better, but it's people working together, artists working together, collaborating. It's very cliquey and sometimes it's tough for different groups to mix together to create opportunities and move things like that forward.
That's real interesting that you said that. I've heard from other artists, not only just in the music side of creativity, but in photography, videography. They've also made those claims, but they don't seem completely kind of out of hope with the potential. Like there's still enough kind of there's enough potential and there's enough exciting people with a lot of talent that are here. I think it just goes down to like Pittsburgh's a gritty city. We're competitive. Like we grew up, we're all local people. We all grew up playing sports, being aggressive. It's some of the more positive traits of being a Pittsburgher, but it also can kind of stab us in the back. And I think having conversations like this and just kind of throwing it out there, like, at the end of the day, we're going to be better off kind of collaborating, linking, growing together.
Absolutely.
Mac Miller and Wiz Khalifa, they both were in a studio together just off of the fact that they went to the same high school and they had a mutual friend.
Sure,
and then what came from those early studio sessions, that should inspire anyone in the city because that's as big as it can get.
I agree.
So on a previous episode of the Boss Streets podcast, we interviewed Art Robinson, and like you, he's an entrepreneur. He has a tech startup here in Pittsburgh, and he had mentioned kind of the culture here, maybe not understanding what it was he was trying to do. And you had mentioned in the music industry here kind of being a little bit behind the eight ball. Do you think that Pittsburgh has an issue where it's too old-fashioned or conservative around innovation? And, have you seen that with your adventures with InStudio?
Absolutely. It's just a lack of understanding, I think, is the biggest thing. And, a lot of the old guard that's been here for a while that, someone like me or someone else would approach with an idea like this for opportunity. And because they don't understand it, I think it's best to them, I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth, but to them, it's just best to keep it pushing, and to find something that they do understand, that does present immediate value in a sense. But I think it's just about educating, and teaching people and proving the value in things like InStudio and things around the music industry, as well as the previous guest you had on. So I think a lot of it is just lack of understanding, and it'll take a little bit of educating and, a handful of people helping move that forward.
As I just wanted to also make one more side comment, like I've known about your startup and the software and what you're building, but like now kind of hearing it all play out, like hearing the entire thing and also just talking about Pittsburgh at large, I'm excited for you that this is both the kind of bridge between startup technology in Pittsburgh and also the music industry, which I just have so much hope for both of those places. And it's not hope lost either, because Pittsburgh's shown that we're worth, a look in those two areas. But, you sometimes just need somebody to come in and, create cool things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big thing is collaboration and team, because I'm not going to be able to do it by myself. No one person is going to be able to accomplish that by themselves. So it's really going to take people in the industry and people with different points of view to come together and help, make that change and help that evolve here in Pittsburgh.
I'm curious as to what your thoughts are, kind of going to the entrepreneurial culture in Pittsburgh. I mean, you grew up in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh.
I didn't grow up in Pittsburgh.
Oh, you didn't grow up in
No,
Pittsburgh?
I moved to Pittsburgh in 2018, 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Troy, Pennsylvania. It's a very small town.
Okay.
About 3.5 hours away. Yeah.
Okay. So really not Pittsburgh. Okay. Yeah. 'Cause I grew up an hour outside of Pittsburgh, but it was close enough. So no. Okay. So you came to the city, big dreams.
Big dreams, I guess you could say that. Just looking for more opportunity. Again, I'm from a very small town with not much opportunity unless you want to be like a farmer or, work the 9 to 5 at a coffee shop, all those little things. But there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I just wanted more. And we were talking about LA earlier off camera. And when I was thinking about where I wanted to go, it was between LA and Pittsburgh, but I thought it was more practical to come to Pittsburgh, closer to home, just in case things happen to not work out. But yeah, I moved here and it was great. It was great.
Yeah, that's a great lead into this question, because I grew up where I wanted to either be in the movie industry or I wanted to be in the tech industry. And I was contemplating going to college in California, in LA, or staying here in Pittsburgh. And I was told by multiple people, stay in Pittsburgh. It's going to be the next Hollywood. It's going to be the next Silicon Valley. We have all these great universities here. We have CMU. We have Pitt. All these great organizations that can help propel entrepreneurship forward.
Just big individuals that have come out of here.
Sure.
Largest accelerator in the country, started by a guy from, I believe, Fox Chapel. So it's just, it continues.
But if you could go back to that point in time, you're deciding between LA and Pittsburgh, do you still pick Pittsburgh?
Oh, every day. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's Pittsburgh is the opportunity is the biggest thing. With a place like LA, there's a bit of oversaturation to it. Everybody's trying to do something and trying to reinvent the wheel that's been reinvented a dozen times in Pittsburgh. I think there's areas where people can still capitalize on opportunity and make something big without, 100 different people trying to do the same thing.
1,000%. And I do think LA, you may have received faster results just because of just the wide array of artists and studios, but like just based on the conversation that we're having and just the market at large, there's a real opportunity to capitalize with this, but it's going to take a lot of work. But that's like the ultimate reason to want to become an entrepreneur in the first place, to make impact as well as obviously succeed.
100%.
Yeah. Circling back again on our previous guest, Art Robinson, he had made comments saying that we need to encourage more African-American entrepreneurs to pursue their ideas and innovate and make a difference in the business world. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. I think there's just a kind of a it's tough. I mean, I have not seen or met many people that look like me in Pittsburgh that pursue entrepreneurship, and it's figuring out ways how to encourage people, to motivate people. I think to some people it seems more impossible than anything or unachievable, but it's super achievable. But I also think the city as a whole has to be a little bit more welcoming to that. Not that they are directly not welcoming it, but it's still that thing of educating and making those paths clear for people like myself and others out there.
So going off that, I want to compare, and we can kind of get into the topic of kind of raising funds. I know that you had said you had not ended up raising funds. That was a blessing in disguise, but you did go through trying to find investment, correct? So I want to compare some of our previous guests and how they went through kind of a funding round. So we have Art, who he has gone through the traditional sort of funding, looking for VCs and accelerators and stuff like that. He's joined the Ascender program, which you talked a bit about. And then we had Jeremy Goldman, who we interviewed, and he had kind of he's going a traditional funding route, I believe, but he's more so going through kind of like the not Kickstarter, but the crowdfunding through Honeycomb. And his campaign was successful. What I'm curious about, though, is just, I'll talk a little bit about my personal experience here, where I see a lot of startups come through our door and they're always trying to find funding. And there is this kind of common thread between all these startups that I talk to, that the money is not here unless it is for health and science or like robotics. Yeah. And I personally believe that's a huge problem, because I think there are other people like you, like Jeremy, like Art, that are doing some incredible things. And I don't know if it's the culture in Pittsburgh or what it is, but it's not supporting those innovative ideas. I want to have, between the three of us, just an open conversation about what that might be.
Yeah, I think people are afraid of change is the biggest thing. I think when you've found success in a limited amount of industries for so long, healthcare, all that stuff, it's like, why would I go and invest in something that I've never invested in before? I guess from an investor standpoint. And it just takes one great investment to excel, become what you call a unicorn in the city of Pittsburgh, in the music industry, or some alternative investment that typically Pittsburgh VCs don't invest in, to just really skyrocket for people to realize, like, oh wow, maybe there is more opportunity here than healthcare, robotics, and all that. So it's something I've definitely noticed, but maybe Pittsburgh could use a firm that leans more on the creative aspect side of things. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. I could guess and make assumptions all day, but it's tough.
I really like that you said that, not to dive too deep into our private conversations, but we also kind of realize that that would be an interesting way to formulate an investment fund / accelerator in the creative space, but it's really just about figuring out what the economics of that are going to be like. So it's kind of like slowly transitioning into that. How do you even function, or how do you even operate investments towards creative concepts? But like businesses like yours are already kind of bridging that gap fundamentally, because your core market are creatives, but also business people. But I think you're trying to make it your main objective is to make creatives be able to focus more on their creative side and have the software to organize their life more, and not have to worry about doing all these things that they used to have to do just functionally on Instagram, or just that grind of having to book and not have any software that's up to date with like other industries.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, obviously we're going to stay in touch, but I really do think it is businesses like this that can really kind of start showing the data on how that would work.
Yeah, and
know?
somebody's going to have to, at some point, a VC or whoever it might be, kind of take a step outside the box and take a gamble on an industry, in my case, a creative industry, to prove that it really works. It's going to take research. It's going to take development. The first idea might not work out perfect, but, I'm more than confident that there is, money to be made in this industry, that there's value to be provided to artists and people in the music industry, in the creative industry. It's just about taking that step out.
I just wanted to mention this. The one issue, and this isn't just a Pittsburgh issue, that's why I'm more comfortable talking about this. It's more of a macro thing at large with private equity and private investments in regards to investing in minority entrepreneurs. I just personally, this is my personal statement, and this comes from me just, staying very much in touch with what's been happening in Silicon Valley. I love certain investment firms. I follow them. They're a great lane to follow if you want to see what's happening in tech, because they're investing in it. And it's just very too often do you see when a minority-based startup company is invested into, it gives off an aura of charity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just do not understand. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I'm not going to, that's for private conversation. Sure. Because, at the end of the day, you're a perfect example of somebody that you're going to get it regardless. Mm-hmm. Like, you're a byproduct of that, and we'll get into that because, and same thing as Art Robinson, like, you're the perfect example of there's no need for charity. Like, you guys are pure bred entrepreneurs, and you're going to get it at any cost.
Yeah. And there are things out there that, grants and stuff like that are designed to help, minority business owners and things of that nature. But I would never tell somebody not to take advantage of that. Like, right. Why wouldn't you? But also, I'm a firm believer, like, you work hard enough and you'll get what you work for.
Of course.
So, yeah.
At the end of the day, I know, just based on following CRM specific software in the tech industry, that's a huge topic right now. Mm-hmm. That software that once kind of proven, what you're at the process of, really proving the technology. This is technology that's being invested into. Mm-hmm. So it's just, I want to mention that just to say, like, you're building something that's valuable, unquestionably. Yeah. So there should be no excuses. And it's just a slight challenge to whoever may be coming across this clip, because I'm going to clip this up. At the end of the day, like, it shouldn't matter. All these things don't matter. The technology matters. The person who's leading the technology, being the face, that should be the only thing that matters in regards.
Yeah, and providing that service to the customers and making sure that artists and the customers have what they need to grow their careers independently. I think more importantly, absolutely. I think there's a big, a well-known fact right now that labels and streaming platforms have the industry in a stronghold. But more and more independents are breaking away and trying to figure out how to do it on their own. And that takes money, and that takes tools and resources, and just to be able to build technologies that help provide that stuff, I think is very important, and like one of my biggest goals.
So I assumed that was a part of the business model, just based on the technology and how you've explained it to me in the past. But just hearing it in that sense, like, this is also for the artist, the recording artist, to actually be able to organize their career to where they can start kind of being or breaking that gap between having to sell 40% to a label, to an agent.
Yeah, for me in InStudio, it was step one. It was getting the foot in the door. Mm-hmm. Obviously, ideas are always flowing, trying to come up with different things, but we are working on some things separate from InStudio that help accomplish those things I previously said.
That just fires me up. I love it. I love it, man. Obviously, being a music head, you see people like Russ, for example, who was like one of the first guys to make it mainstream, that really just pushed out this consistent narrative of, you can make it independent.
Chance the Rapper?
Yes, Chance the Rapper. And for Russ got more of the, he annoyed more people just because of his personality. Right. Italian, you're just in your face about it. But it did, from a business perspective, like, it really did open, I think, just the average person in pop culture, or like our generation's mind, to like, oh, like, the way in which it's been done before, technology is erasing that. It doesn't mean that you can't make joint ventures with institutions, but if you can get leverage yourself, if you can build a proof of concept without having to sell 30% of your rights or even more, sometimes you got to do that. Like they got to look like, they have to look at their careers like businesses, like entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
And that's a really interesting point, though, because I do want to highlight that, because I do think that there's a misconception around what an entrepreneur is. And an entrepreneur is anyone, in my opinion, who takes a risk, takes a leap into something that is unknown, that there is no guaranteed return on investment or service or time spent. That's an entrepreneur. And I think that that's what the city has to do a better job of, is supporting those types of people, regardless of, age, gender, race. It doesn't matter. It should be based upon what, in my opinion, what the market feels is good. And I think that you're onto the right track with InStudio, because I don't know much about the music industry, but the individual, there's this wave of individuality. I'm my own content creator. I'm my own musician. Exactly. Let me, do my own thing. And I'm curious, though, just to kind of talk about the music industry a bit. Have you experienced any pushback from people, whether it be investors, studios signing up, individuals, because they're afraid of like these bigger fish are going to come at your throat?
Great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
I think the biggest, in terms of investors, the biggest feedback was the lack of data, which is one big issue in the music industry, especially when it comes to recording studios and artists and relationship between them. There's no data out there, and for a lot of firms and stuff like that's a big no-no. But it's like, how do you? Obviously, there's not data there for a reason.
I know.
And we have an opportunity to build that data and research it and analyze it and capitalize upon it. And that was like the biggest thing with the firms was there's no data. So
I'm cringing right now. If the audience could hear me in the back, just cringing like. That's the difference on why Pittsburgh, there's been false promises of it is going to be the new Silicon Valley. As long as you're hearing things like that as a reason why someone's not going to invest into your company, that's kind of building the ground floor of an industry that's already a huge part of society, but just not advanced technologically. That's really the situation. And they're telling you that there's not enough data. Yeah. And they don't feel comfortable enough. That's the difference between Mark Andreessen and whoever.
yeah, absolutely.
But for real,
it's a big thing. Data is obviously data's big, and I think data is very important. You can make very informed decisions based on data, but data's got to come from somewhere. And I think InStudio and just our endeavors with tech in the music industry, we have an opportunity to build that data and make people more aware of what's going on and the relationships and how things work.
I'm just excited. This is just exciting to me, dude. I love it. And we've talked about this before. Me and Jordan have had dinner and you guys have worked together, but I don't know, man. It just excites me.
It is. It's really exciting.
It's fun. It's popular culture. It's music. It's rap. We're still in a city where, Mac Miller, Wiz, you feel the energy of everything. And then in tech, we still have grown up on the mythical tales of men that have even been in this building, the Carnegies, the Fricks, and even just modern Mark Cuban, Y Combinator. I don't know. But it's just all bringing it together, and there's pieces, but maybe it is going to be that merge between popular culture and tech innovation that could get the city excited.
Yeah.
Because I do think Pittsburgh, for all of its really advanced infrastructure when it comes to tech, we're still a city that is kind of ran by the everyday Pittsburgher, the one going to Steelers games, supporting the team, has a pride for the city. There is something special about being a Pittsburgher that I think we all feel. So that's something that can be leveraged for someone in your position, or just somebody that's kind of tapping into stuff that we as Pittsburghers care about, which music is definitely one of those things. And I think tech has been bridged off from society in Pittsburgh. It's in its little bubble and it's not commonly talked about, even though it's always existed near us. In Silicon Valley, Kids know about the companies. Their dads might work for the businesses. They're coming up. They're going to Stanford. There seems to be more of a culture where pop culture and tech are kind of the same.
Absolutely.
Where in Pittsburgh, it's very different. They're two different worlds.
It's a blue collar mentality. I mean, this is my personal opinion about the startup realm in Pittsburgh, is that it's conservative and blue collar. There is this, again, my personal opinion, I'm convinced that there's this mentality that if I cannot guarantee, tech is a risk, compared to other like brick and mortar shops, tech is a huge risk. And there is this mentality here that if I'm going to invest X amount of money, I want a guaranteed return of X. And I think the culture over in Silicon Valley, in Austin, Texas, and even in like Atlanta, is more so around, let's take a risk, let's take a shot in the dark. I have disposable income. Let's just see where this thing goes. And I think that culture is, not here in Pittsburgh. I think what's big in Pittsburgh, I want to like transition into, is the accelerator programs. The accelerator programs, or incubators, whatever you want to call them, they're sort of popular here. I remember when I was in school, if, you had a startup. If you can get into one of those programs, you felt like you were set. I think both of you have experience with those accelerator programs. What are your thoughts on the Pittsburgh accelerator programs?
I'm obviously, accelerator programs are great for entrepreneurs and businesses who find value in that and would like those resources to help start their early company. I had some experience with the Pittsburgh accelerator program, and it was just an interesting experience. I never got in, but in terms of the interviewing and the kind of the questioning and the criteria, it was a very interesting experience. And I at the end of the day, I don't think it was a great fit for InStudio anyways. I got to the final round of interviews, and it was I remember it was a Zoom call, and there was like 5 or 6 different people from the accelerator kind of interviewing me, and it was just it wasn't lively. It just seemed like this is what they do every day. And for a company like InStudio, I think for anybody who has their own company, you want something exciting. You want people who are excited about your company. And I think accelerators, it's tough with all the companies they go through to be excited about all of them, But that was just my one experience. I don't want to speak for all accelerators in Pittsburgh. But yeah.
That's a common though kind of response. Yeah, sorry about that. That's a common response that I've seen from customers of mine that go through those programs. Is not saying that it's not helpful. There's things they do very well, but the feedback that I've personally got from other people is similar in that it's they have this mentality that I'm going to join this accelerator and they're going to help accelerate this idea forward, and it's more so. From the feedback I've gotten, again, I don't want to put words in people's mouth, but you're doing all the work. It's like you got into this program and there's resources, but those resources actually might not have been as successful as you. So it's this weird dynamic where I think if you talk about like a Y Combinator, where you have some A-list stars who come into these incubators and they're like, you might have, I'm not making this up, but you might have an Elon Musk that walks into that incubator and be like, yeah, I can help you get this to the next level. Yeah. Whereas the feedback I've gotten here is we don't have those. The incubators here are not so much the stars. It's more that conservative, mindset. There's not some big name or person who has pull that can kind of just take your idea and be like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm going to help you launch this to the next step.
I'm in the trenches with you.
Right.
There's not much sweat equity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Accelerators are kind of different about them in a sense, but also unsure about them. I think for me personally, I learned a lot from real world experience, from falling down and getting back up, and I don't know how well accelerators provide that, especially in Pittsburgh. Obviously you have people there to help you, but there's still not that A-list mentor there to really break it down for you in real time. And so I guess I'm more in the boat of like, let's keep falling down, let's keep getting back up and learn from my mistakes and keep moving forward.
To add to that point, and then I have one more question, just kind of to expand on that a little bit, but we dealt with the same accelerator, we just know because we talked about it. And I will add, like, when you have a first meeting with somebody and it's a younger employee, probably right out of college, and they're vetting me, like, we're dealing with an accelerator. We're talking about the opportunity to be educated by people who have went through the entrepreneurial process and now want to give back. And they're also getting equity. Like, there's mutual value, hands-on. That's the successful accelerator model from a macro perspective, that we find in the West and parts of New York and such. But, like, again, and this isn't to just gripe on Pittsburgh. This is just to have an open dialogue and just challenge. Because I think we all feel the same way. Like, we obviously believe in Pittsburgh. There's something that's keeping us here, dude. You don't have to stay here. You can leave, man.
Yeah.
You could leave. We could leave. We can do whenever. Like, at the end of the day, like, we're young. We can do it. But there's something that's keeping us here. There's a faith, and there's a hope that a spark can happen.
Yeah.
So it's worth having these conversations. If somebody's offended by this conversation, then, like, I don't really care.
I mean, that's honestly my hope for these Lunchbox series is that if we could discuss this with these different people who have been in the entrepreneurial culture here and kind of try to figure out at some level what is preventing Pittsburgh from getting to that next level. Because I mean,
I'm learning a lot just from this dialogue.
Yeah,
man.
I mean, I've brought this up on multiple episodes and asked this kind of question to different people on the show, and it's all kind of the same thing. Like, yeah, like, it's good, but it could be better. We're not really sure why. I think it's kind of conservative mindset around investing, which is all fine. But I do think that we have all the resources, organizations, and whatnot here in Pittsburgh to make this the next Silicon Valley. It's just, how do we come together and do that? And my overarching hope is, by the end of these Lunchbox series with this podcast, that we come to some conclusion between all these different guests, because I think that's a huge problem. And people love Pittsburgh. People want to stay. But there's something to it that is missing, that's preventing it from going to the next level, in my opinion. Yeah,
and obviously I don't have the answer, but all I can do is observe and kind of give you my informed opinion,
1,000%.
What I think. And a big thing is, I'm big on collaboration, team, bringing people together to achieve the same goal. But it's also, you have people that come together, say in the city of Pittsburgh, and they say, hey, let's start this accelerator program. And we want to be different about it. And you start making these investments and bringing companies in, and things don't go right. So you kind of go to the plain Jane route, and now you're just like all these other accelerators. So it's really about being different too. I believe it's really about being different, not being afraid to kind of step outside the box, take a risk, maybe fall on your face, but make those investments that typical accelerator programs or VCs wouldn't typically make investments in. And like the first 20 investments might fail, but you get like 5 or 10 of them to really take off, and you've built a great foundation for yourself and the community and the people that you're working with. So obviously you don't want to fail 20 times.
But I think to add to your point, because that's so spot on, I think understanding the accelerator concept and like the venture capital infrastructure, these are places in our economy that should be earned by the individuals that are there, from the sense of, I think where we're getting the plain Jane approach is that people are joining or building an accelerator from the same mindset as you, a startup founder. That can't be how it is. It's not that it's not a monetary business model. It absolutely is. The gains are huge. But if you're coming at it from a position of not already succeeding, to be frank, from a financial perspective, and you're trying to get those short-term gains, that is a fundamental conflict with what needs to be done. These are 3 to 4 year projects. If you want to appropriately bring in the right people and garner the relationship and garner the business properly. And I think from my own personal experience, from hearing yours, and just reflecting as we're sitting here talking, like there seems to be too much of a corporate approach with something that is not corporate.
Yeah, you said something I liked. You said it's a 3 or 4 year,
Yes.
it's a growth period. And I think a lot of these accelerator programs and VCs, when you're pitching to them, is like, how am I going to get my money back next year? How is this going to pay off immediately? And it's like, for great things and great opportunities, I don't think that's how it works personally.
You should have went to a bank.
Things take time. Yeah, exactly. Things take time. Perfection takes time.
There's a fundamental difference, I think, between tech startups and what I'll call your brick and mortar startups. Like, just to kind of reflect on the two guests we've been talking about in this episode, Art and Jeremy, they're both great entrepreneurs. They both have really cool ideas, but fundamentally, the way they can go about raising money is different between the two. Art has a runway where he's got to have 2 to 5 years of user base before he starts seeing a real return on his investment. Jeremy might see a return on investment from day one just because of the nature of those businesses. And I think the culture here in Pittsburgh shies away from the tech industry because, like you said, it's a 3 to 4 year project. So I think that's really, really important to highlight because I think that's a hardship that a lot of tech-based entrepreneurs face in Pittsburgh, but of course across the country. But I think the culture here in Pittsburgh is shying away from, this is a risk that might not see a return for 4 years. I'm going to kind of stay away from it, at least in my personal opinion.
And from an entrepreneur standpoint, like that can be very defeating. Like,
absolutely.
if you're in the tech industry and you realize, that this could take a little bit of time, and then you hear these people tell you, the turnaround time is going to take too long. Like, that is defeating. And then if you don't see results within 2 years, within a year, most people just like scrap it and say, let's not do that again, as opposed to really sticking with it and working through all the kinks and making it happen. Not that every 3 to 4 year period is going to be perfect, but you provide more opportunity for it to be.
Absolutely.
It's a cliche topic in regards to like this conversation when talking about startups that have succeeded in the last 10 years or so, but the Airbnb kind of journey, literally as they're building their V1, they're selling something as silly as like cereal to be able to make the proper
that whole
investment.
company on credit cards.
Yeah, unbelievably like insane. But again, the difference between them coming out of Y Combinator, which still has Paul Graham, who is a Pittsburgh guy, and he comes back and speaks here every once in a while, and he gets us all excited, and he says, Silicon Valley, or the next Silicon Valley, which is not his job.
Sure.
It's our job at the end of the day, but he's the one that even got that idea planted in my mind, watching an interview from him. But to have, like, imagine there was an accelerator there actually allowing them to sell cereal. Like, that's a real thing. Selling cereal. I insane. Running up credit cards. They were okay with that. They were cool with it. They were helping them step by step. They weren't telling them, hey man, if you don't get this, in the next 3 months, we're going to have to pull it and, best of luck.
Sure.
Just basically saying like, just delete it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's a cultural thing. Like we've been saying, I think it's just the mindset here needs to change. And I think as entrepreneurs, we have to make an effort to help change that mindset here. Because I think Pittsburgh's a great place. I'm biased, of course, but
I mean, I haven't lived here my entire life, but when I moved here, you could feel it. You can feel it in the air. There's just something about this city. And honestly, I was pretty baffled that it wasn't bigger than it actually was when I first came here. You just see the city. You drive through the 4 pit tunnels and you see everything. And it hits you like this place is special.
Yeah.
And it's going to take people like us, the other young entrepreneurs out there, making ways to come together and make that happen, make Pittsburgh that place, the Silicon Valley of, the East, I guess.
And also just bring in the pride of the city at large. Cause I just think it's such a, to use a word I used on a the Fantasy Alpha podcast. Aura. Like there is an aura around Pittsburgh people at large when they're in
Pittsburgh supports Pittsburgh.
When they're at a Penguins game, when they're at a Steelers game, it's unbelievable. It's unlike anything in like, you know, American pop culture. It's not that can be emulated with startups in the music industry right now because we don't have like a new upcoming act, but like it's still there. And like the city is so prideful of its own. So just even getting that type of support, feeling the support of the average Pittsburgher for things like a technology or for music coming out of the city, a new rise and hope that can really just, there's a mental aspect to that. Like it just springboards so many things. Like Mac Miller just got people excited. He did a couple music videos in Oakland and like, it just went up like 2 mixtapes in and it was just up. And think about what Wiz Khalifa's first ever hit song was. It was a Pittsburgh anthem, bro.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It was
that's
Black
right.
and Yellow. That was strategic.
Pittsburgh supports Pittsburgh.
It was
man,
literally, it was tapping into a very, very special culture. I don't think tech in this city has kind of opened their doors just for spectators even. I'm not saying that the average person, they can't buy a ticket to the game, but they can support the app.
Yeah.
They can go talk to you. It can just be more of a conversation that everyone kind of understands what's going on. And I don't know. I just have a feeling that would change the game a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the tech companies here, they look to other places for inspiration and you know, like what to do type of things, as opposed to looking in for inspiration and support and things of that nature. So it's just, again, just keeping it here as opposed to running away to some other city or
100% agree.
Yeah.
Got to build the culture, man. Got to build the culture here.
Yeah, that's it.
Jordan, I appreciate you sharing your story with us, telling us about InStudio and kind of giving your insights into the entrepreneurial culture, VC culture here in Pittsburgh, and kind of giving some feedback for our listeners. I think that's really important. Before we wrap up the show, we always ask our guests one question, and that question is, if you can give one word of advice to a young entrepreneur or someone who wanted to start a business, what would that be?
Just do it. Like, like shout out to Nike, I guess. But no, but really, you just do it and don't be afraid to fail. You know, it's not easy, but it's fulfilling. It's a journey, but it's just do it.
Absolutely.
We're going to be rooting for you, man.
I appreciate it. I
100%.
appreciate it, guys.
It's a great
You guys
conversation.
are great.